There comes a moment in your life when God will look at you and say, are you done yet? Are you done losing sleep over what you can't fix? Done carrying burdens that were never yours to lift? Done trying to control storms that only God can command? Because sometimes the greatest breakthrough you'll ever receive doesn't come when you fight harder. It comes when you finally surrender. I came to tell somebody today, stop worrying. Trust God with what you cannot control. Worry is a weight God never designed you to carry, yet so many people wake up every morning already exhausted before the day even begins. Not because they ran a marathon, not because they worked a double shift, but because their mind has been running all night, carrying loads it was never built to hold. Worry is heavy. It presses on your chest, tightens your breath, clutters your thoughts, and drains your spiritual energy. It convinces you that if you don't hold everything together, everything will fall apart. But God never asked you to be the glue. God asked you to trust Him. The problem is that when life gets loud, we forget that truth. We start believing the lie that we must carry, manage, control, and foresee every outcome. We start thinking that our limitations are failures instead of signals pointing us back to the God who is none. There are people who worry the moment they hear good news because they are already imagining how it might turn bad. They can't celebrate victories because they are scanning for danger. They can't enjoy rest because they are rehearsing what could go wrong tomorrow. Worry is a thief. It steals today because it is obsessed with tomorrow. It poisons the present by projecting fear into a future that hasn't even arrived. And if you carry worry long enough, it doesn't just break your peace. It breaks your identity. You start thinking you are responsible for everybody's safety, everyone's happiness, every solution, every outcome. But that's not you. That's not your assignment. That is God's job, and God has never asked you to apply for His position. Sometimes the reason we cling to worry is because it gives us an illusion of control. Humans fear the unknown, so we try to manage uncertainty by mentally preparing for every possible disaster. But worry doesn't prevent the problem, it just multiplies the pain. Replaying negative possibilities over and over doesn't protect you. It imprisons you. It keeps you living life on the defense, waiting for something to go wrong, waiting for the next blow, the next loss, the next setback. You cannot live a victorious life while thinking like a victim. You cannot claim peace while clinging to panic, and you cannot walk in faith while feeding fear. Worry and trust cannot occupy the same space. One will always push the other out if you pay close attention. Worry always begins with, what if? What if I fail? What if they leave? What if I don't make it? What if everything falls apart? But faith begins with a different question. What if God comes through? What if God turns it around? What if the thing I fear the most becomes the testimony that blesses me the greatest? Worry imagines defeat, but faith imagines possibility. Worry rehearses pain, but faith rehearses promise. When you shift your focus from your fear to your Father, the weight of worry starts to melt because your perspective starts to rise. You stop seeing yourself as someone trying to survive a storm and start recognizing that you serve the God who commands the wind and the waves. Worry also grows in the soil of over-responsibility. So many people are carrying the emotional weight of situations that are not theirs. You're worried about what people think of you, but you can't control their thoughts. You're worried about what might happen next year, but you're not living in next year. You're worried about outcomes, timelines, and doors that only God can open. When you keep picking up things that are not yours, life becomes heavier than it needs to be. You were designed to carry your obedience, not God's sovereignty. Your job is to trust. His job is to work all things together for your good. Your job is to listen. His job is to lead. Your job is to take the step. His job is to part the sea. The weight on your shoulders feels unbearable because you're carrying God's side of the assignment instead of your own. Some of you have spent years carrying fears that were passed down to you. You watched parents or guardians worry, so you learned to worry. You saw people around you panic at every challenge, so you adopted the same habits. But generational fear must end somewhere, and it can end with you. You do not have to pass worry down to the next generation. You can model peace. You can model trust. You can model surrender. You can teach by your life that people who walk with God do not have to live tormented by what if. The moment you put your trust back in God, the cycle breaks. The moment you drop the weight that wasn't yours, something shifts in the atmosphere of your heart. Peace finds room to breathe. Clarity finds room to speak. Strength finds room to rise. Worry is also connected to imagination. God gave you an imagination to dream, create, build, envision, but worry hijacks that imagination and turns it into a weapon against you. Instead of imagining possibilities, you imagine catastrophes. Instead of imagining breakthroughs, you imagine breakdowns. Instead of imagining how God can move, you imagine how everything can fall apart. When you surrender your imagination back to God, you reclaim one of your greatest spiritual tools. Suddenly your mind stops being a battlefield and becomes a birthplace, a place where faith grows, vision breathes, and hope stretches its wings again. Another truth about worry is this: it drains you for battles you'll never have to fight. How many nights have you lost sleep preparing for a problem that never happened? How many days have you walked around tense, anxious, distracted by something that only existed in your mind? That's what worry does. It takes energy you need for today and invests it in a tomorrow God has already secured. It convinces you to fear outcomes God has already defeated. And the more you feed it, the heavier it becomes. But the moment you choose trust, the weight begins to lift. The moment you choose surrender, the pressure begins to break. The moment you choose prayer instead of panic, heaven steps into the room. Worry is not just a weight, it's a warning sign. It's a signal that your soul is overwhelmed and that you are carrying something you need to release into God's hands. Instead of seeing worry as a failure, see it as an invitation. Every time worry rises, let it push you into the presence of God. Let it become a reminder that you don't walk this road alone. Let it become a cue that it's time to drop what's heavy and take hold of what's holy. You are not meant to carry stress like a burden. You are meant to cast it like a stone, throw it onto the shoulders of the one who can handle it. When you finally recognize that worry is a weight not designed for you, you become free to live again, free to breathe, free to hope, free to trust, free to move forward without the chains of fear dragging behind you. God did not design you to crumble under pressure. He designed you to lean on Him. And the moment you lean, the weight shifts. The moment you trust, the load lifts. The moment you let go, the peace comes. And in that peace, you finally realize what God has been trying to tell you all along. You were never meant to carry this. Give it to me. What you can't control, God has already planned for. But the problem is that we spend so much of our lives trying to manage what was never in our hands to begin with. Human beings love certainty, structure, predictability. We love to know what's coming next, how things will unfold, who will stay, who will leave, what will succeed, what will fail. But life doesn't give us that kind of clarity. And God doesn't operate according to our craving for control. God reveals things in pieces and stages and seasons. He shows us step one and hides step two. He opens door A and leaves door B locked. He gives us a promise but doesn't give us the timeline. And because we don't have the full picture, we panic. We think something is wrong simply because something is unknown. But the unknown isn't a threat to God. It's the place where His sovereignty shines brightest. There are things happening behind the scenes of your life that you don't even have the capacity to understand right now. Conversations being had, opportunities being shaped, people being prepared, doors being built, detours being arranged, and none of it requires your permission or participation. It only requires your trust. You might be pacing the floor, worrying about how God is going to work something out, while God is sitting confidently on His throne saying, I already have. You're worried about the situation that hasn't changed. God is focused on the outcome that's already settled. You're stressing about timing. God is aligning every second with precision and purpose. What you can't control, God has not only foreseen, He has already made a way through. Some people live with the illusion that control equals safety. They think, if I can just plan it perfectly, I'll avoid pain. If I can stay ahead of every problem, I'll stay protected. If I can manage every detail, life won't surprise me. But control is a counterfeit kind of security. It tricks you into thinking you can predict life when life has never once asked your permission before shifting. The people you expect to stay sometimes leave. The job you think is stable sometimes collapses. The plans you make sometimes get rewritten in the blink of an eye. That doesn't mean you failed. It means you were never the author in the first place. God wrote the story long before you learned how to read it. There are things in your life that you have lost sleep over, things you have prayed about, cried about, stressed about, yet none of your worry changed the outcome. But God was working even when you didn't see movement. Sometimes his silence is not absence, it's orchestration. It's him aligning details you didn't know needed alignment. It's him shifting people you didn't even know were part of your future. It's him preparing the blessing so it won't crush you when it arrives. If he answered every prayer instantly, you might step into something at the wrong stage of development. If he opened every door the moment you knocked, you might walk into a room unprepared for what's inside. God doesn't just prepare blessings, he prepares you for the blessings. There are moments in life when God will let your control break on purpose. Not because he wants you to suffer, but because he wants you to surrender. As long as you believe you are the one holding everything together, you will keep exhausting yourself trying to play a role you were never designed to play. So God allows situations that force you to recognize your limits. When the relationship doesn't go according to plan, when the career shifts unexpectedly, when the finances fluctuate, when the opportunity closes, when the path becomes foggy. All of that is an invitation to trust the one who sees beyond the fog. When life feels out of control, it doesn't mean everything is falling apart. Sometimes it means everything is falling into place, just not your place, but God's place. Think about the times in your life when things didn't go the way you expected, but ended up better than you could have planned. That wasn't coincidence. That was sovereignty. That was God proving to you that his plan is not limited by your understanding. Sometimes the greatest deliverances come disguised as disappointments. You didn't get the job, but God was saving you from a dead end. You didn't get the relationship, but God was protecting you from heartbreak. The door didn't open, but God was preserving you for a door that wasn't ready yet. If you had control, you would have stepped into something too small, too toxic, too temporary, but God blocked it because he had something better. We love to pray, Lord, have your way, but then we want to supervise how he does it. We want to approve his methods, his timing, his process. We want blessings without the waiting. We want clarity without the uncertainty. We want growth without discomfort. But trust doesn't grow in comfort. It grows in surrender. God often reveals his power most clearly in situations where you have the least control. That's where faith becomes real, not when everything makes sense, but when nothing does, and yet you choose to believe anyway. Your lack of control is not a weakness, it is a doorway. A doorway into deeper faith, deeper dependence, deeper relationship with God. When you finally release the need to control the details, you make room for God to move. You make room for his creativity, his time, and his wisdom. You make room for solutions you never imagined, outcomes you never expected, blessings you didn't even know to pray for. When you hold on too tightly, you block the flow. When you let go, you unlock the miracle. God is not asking you to understand everything. He is asking you to trust him through anything. You don't have to know how it will work out to believe that it will. You don't have to see the full path to take the next faithful step. You don't need control when you have a God who controls all things with precision and purpose. Your responsibility is obedience. His responsibility is outcome. Your responsibility is trust. His responsibility is fulfillment. Your responsibility is faithfulness. His responsibility is miracle working. When you finally embrace that truth, the anxiety loosens its grip. The overthinking quiets down. The pressure lifts from your shoulders. You begin to walk with a different kind of confidence, not the confidence that comes from knowing the plan, but the confidence that comes from knowing the planner. He has never been surprised, never been overwhelmed, never been confused, never been defeated. If he has planned it, it is secure. If he has spoken it, it is settled. If he has promised it, it will come to pass. What you can't control is not your burden. It's your blessing. It's the proof that God is involved. It's the evidence that his hands are working even when yours are empty. And the moment you surrender what you can't control, you step into the peace God has been trying to give you all along. Peace that doesn't come from certainty, but from surrender. Peace that doesn't come from answers, but from alignment. Peace that doesn't come from control, but from trust. And once you taste that kind of peace, you will never again try to carry the weight of what God has already planned for. Trust grows when your strength ends and God's begins, because trust is not developed in seasons when everything is smooth, predictable, or easy. Trust is formed in the tension, in the pressure, in the moments that stretch you beyond what you thought you could bear. You don't learn trust when you feel strong. You learn trust when you feel empty. You don't learn trust when you have the answers. You learn it when nothing makes sense. You don't learn trust when the path is clear. You learn it when the road is dark and your only option is to walk by faith. Trust is not a theory. It is an experience that only deepens when your strength runs out and you discover that God's strength has no limit. Many people believe they trust God until life breaks their rhythm, until something arrives that they can't fix, can't control, can't predict, can't navigate with their own understanding. That's when trust is truly tested. When the plan falls apart, when the timeline shifts, when the doctor's report changes, when a door slams shut instead of swinging open, when the people you thought you could rely on walk away. In those moments, human strength is not enough, and that becomes the very ground where trust takes root. Because trust is not birthed in comfort, it is birthed in collision, the collision between human limitation and divine sufficiency. Trust grows in the dark because the dark forces you to reach for something beyond yourself. It's one thing to say God is good when everything is working. It's another thing to say it when nothing is working. It's one thing to say, I believe, when doors are opening. It's another to say it when every door seems locked. In the moments when you have no strength left to keep pushing, that's when you realize that God doesn't need your strength to do his work. He needs your surrender. And surrender is the soil where trust blossoms. There are times when God will intentionally let your strength empty out so that you stop relying on yourself and finally lean on him. As long as you think you can do it alone, you will try. As long as you think your plan is superior, you will follow it. As long as you think your wisdom is sufficient, you will depend on it. But God loves you too much to let you settle for a life powered by human strength, because human strength runs out. Human strength gets tired. Human strength gets discouraged. Human strength gets overwhelmed. But when your strength ends, you encounter a different power, a power that doesn't crumble under pressure, a power that doesn't bend under fear, a power that doesn't break when life hits hard. That's where trust is born, in the realization that God's strength carries what yours cannot. Some people misunderstand trust because they believe trust means you have to feel strong. But trust doesn't require strength, it requires honesty. Honesty about your limits, honesty about your fears, honesty about your exhaustion, honesty about the places where you can't hold it together anymore. God doesn't ask for your perfection, he asks for your dependence. The moment you bring your weakness to him, he meets you with his strength. The moment you admit your limitations, he meets you with his ability. The moment you stop pretending you've got it all under control, he steps in with authority and peace. Trust deepens in the long waiting seasons, the seasons where nothing seems to change, yet God keeps asking you to believe. The seasons where you feel stuck between what he promised and what you're seeing. The seasons where progress is invisible, but faith is necessary. These seasons are uncomfortable, but they are essential. Because waiting is not punishment, waiting is formation. Waiting doesn't weaken trust, waiting strengthens it. It teaches you to rely on God's character instead of his speed. It teaches you to value God's presence more than his timelines. It teaches you to walk by promise rather than by sight. Every day you trust God while you're waiting, your spiritual muscles grow stronger. Every day you choose faith over frustration, your roots grow deeper. Trust is like a muscle. You don't build it by lifting light things. You build it by lifting what is heavy. There are moments when God will let life stretch you so far that you feel like you're about to break, but you don't break. Instead, you discover that his grace was holding you the entire time. Grace keeps you when strength fails you. Grace sustains you when courage wavers. Grace carries you when you feel too weak to take one more step. And every time grace catches you, trust grows. Every time you feel his support under your trembling feet, trust grows. Every time you look back and realize, I survived what I thought would destroy me, trust grows. God isn't trying to weaken you. He's trying to show you that your real strength doesn't come from within you, it comes from him. Trust also grows when God surprises you, when he opens a door you never expected, when he makes a way you didn't plan for, when he answers a prayer you had almost given up on, when he turns something around that you thought was beyond recovery. These moments remind you that God is not limited by circumstances, time, or human reasoning. They remind you that while your strength has boundaries, his strength has none. And the more you witness God doing what you could not do, the more your trust expands. There is something powerful that happens when a person reaches the end of themselves. That is the point where pride dies and faith rises. When you have no answer, you become available to the one who is the answer. When you run out of options, you become positioned for God's intervention. When your strength is depleted, God's strength becomes visible. And once you have experienced God's strength holding you up in a moment when your own strength collapsed, you will never again doubt his ability to handle what you cannot. Many people don't realize that trust is not the absence of fear, it is the decision to move forward anyway. Trust doesn't erase uncertainty. It gives you the courage to walk through uncertainty with a steady heart. Trust doesn't guarantee you won't feel overwhelmed. It guarantees you won't be overwhelmed alone. God steps into the very places where your ability ends. When your strength is no longer enough to carry the weight of your situation, his strength takes over. When your wisdom isn't enough to solve the problem, his wisdom shows you a path you didn't see. When your understanding isn't enough to make sense of the moment, his peace stabilizes you. Trust grows because God proves himself again and again, not in the areas where you feel strong, but in the places where you feel weakest. And the more you lean on him, the more you learn that he never fails, never disappears, never leaves you unsupported. Your strength ending is not a crisis. It is a divine setup. A setup for God to reveal his power. A setup for God to deepen your faith. A setup for God to show you that you are not alone, not abandoned, not forgotten. So the next time you feel like you're running on empty, don't panic. It may be the moment your trust is about to grow. When your strength ends, God's strength begins. When your ability stops, his ability starts. When your resources dry up, his abundance flows. When your understanding collapses, his wisdom guides. You were not created to be self-sufficient. You were created to be God-dependent. And the moment you embrace that truth, trust stops being a struggle and becomes a lifestyle built not on your strength, but on his unshakable, unstoppable, inexhaustible strength. Surrender is not defeat, it's divine alignment. But most people misunderstand surrender because they associate it with weakness, loss, giving up, or being overpowered. In human terms, surrender feels like laying down your weapons because you've run out of strength options or hope. But in the kingdom of God, surrender is not a sign that you're losing. It's a sign that you're finally allowing God to win. It is the moment when your will bows to his wisdom, when your plans yield to his purpose, when your fear collapses under his authority. Surrender is not the end of your fight. It is the beginning of God's fight for you. And when God fights for you, victory becomes inevitable. The reason surrender feels uncomfortable is because it requires you to release control. Humans cling to control like a lifeline. We believe if we can manage every detail, plan every outcome, and protect ourselves from every risk, we will stay safe. But control is an illusion. You can't control people's decisions. You can't control the timing of blessings. You can't control the seasons life takes you through. You can't control who leaves or who stays. You can't control how every circumstance unfolds. And the tighter you grip the things you cannot control, the more life slips through your fingers. Surrender is not losing your grip. It is loosening your grip on what was never yours to hold. Surrender is alignment with what God already ordained. It is stepping into the current of his plan instead of fighting against it. Picture someone trying to swim upstream. fighting against the flow of the river, exhausted, frustrated, drained. The moment they turn their body in the direction of the water's flow, everything changes. They move without struggle. They glide with ease. The power of the river carries them further than their strength ever could. Surrender does the same thing spiritually. When you stop fighting God's direction and start agreeing with it, momentum enters your life. Peace enters your mind. Clarity enters your decisions. You begin to move with God instead of against Him. Some people resist surrender because they fear what God might ask of them. They are afraid God's plan will cost them something, a relationship, a dream, an identity, a comfort zone. But surrender doesn't take from you. It frees you. It doesn't shrink your life. It expands it. It doesn't strip you, it strengthens you. When you surrender to God, you are not losing yourself. You are finding the version of yourself that was buried under fear, pride, control, and pressure. You are discovering who you were born to be, not who you were forced to be. Surrender also requires trust. You won't surrender to someone you don't trust, and you won't trust someone you don't know. That's why God allows seasons where He reveals His faithfulness, not to stress you, but to show you that His hands are safer than yours. Every time God comes through for you, every time He protects you from something you didn't see, every time He closes a door you didn't understand, every time He arranges a blessing you never expected, He gives you evidence that surrender is safe. He builds trust so surrender becomes natural. He shows you that holding on hurts you far more than letting go ever will. Think about the areas of your life you've tried to force, the relationships you tried to hold together even though they were draining you. The opportunities you chased that never felt aligned. The plans you tried to cram into place even though the doors kept closing. When you force what God has not ordained, you exhaust yourself. But when you surrender what God has not assigned, you free yourself. Because surrender isn't giving up on life, it's giving in to God. It's admitting that His ways are higher, His thoughts better, His timing wiser, is choosing alignment over anxiety. There are times when surrender looks like stopping the constant overthinking. Stopping the need to control outcomes. Stopping the habit of carrying people who refuse to carry themselves. Stopping the self-blame for things outside your authority. Stopping the endless battle with situations God has already asked you to release. When you stop fighting battles God never asked you to fight, peace returns. When you stop trying to force open doors God has closed, direction becomes clear. When you stop gripping what God is trying to remove, your hands become free to receive what He is trying to give. Other times, surrender looks like continuing to pray even when you don't see results, continuing to believe even when nothing changes, continuing to obey even when it feels uncomfortable, continuing to walk in faith even when fear whispers in your ear. Surrender doesn't always look passive. Sometimes it looks persistent. Sometimes surrender is not giving up. It is getting up. Getting up again after disappointment. Getting up again after heartbreak. Getting up again after failure. Getting up again because you trust that God has not abandoned you, that your story is not over, that your future is not determined by your last setback. That is surrender too. Surrendering your discouragement to God and choosing to keep moving anyway. Surrender is also about identity. When you surrender, you detach your identity from outcomes. You stop basing your worth on success, approval, performance, or applause. You stop measuring yourself by what works or doesn't work. You start seeing yourself through God's eyes instead of the world's expectations. Surrender says, even if it doesn't happen the way I hoped, God is still good and I am still His. That mindset is powerful because it breaks the chains that hold so many people hostage. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of disappointment. When your identity is rooted in God, surrender becomes easier because you're no longer afraid of losing something that could never define you in the first place. There is a moment in every believer's life when they must confront the truth. Either God is Lord or your fear is. Either God leads or your emotions lead. Either God directs or your control directs. Surrender is the moment you choose the voice of God over the noise of your fear. It's the moment you say, God, I don't understand it, but I trust you. I don't like this season, but I trust you. I don't know what's next, but I trust you. I don't have the strength, but I trust you. That decision shifts the atmosphere of your soul. Fear loses its grip, Anxiety loses its authority. You begin to walk with a quiet confidence, not because the storm is gone, but because you know the one who calms storms is with you. Surrender is not just an act, it is a rhythm of releasing and receiving. Releasing what hurts, what confuses, what burdens, what limits, what distracts. Receiving peace, clarity, wisdom, strength, direction, and alignment. Every time you surrender, heaven aligns with your life a little more. Every time you surrender, the path becomes clearer. Every time you surrender, you grow lighter, freer, stronger. You step out of striving and into flowing, out of fear and into faith, out of pressure and into purpose. Because surrender positions you under the flow of God's grace. And when you are aligned with that flow, nothing can stop what God is doing in your life. So understand this: deeply surrender is not defeat. It is not the end. It is not weakness. It is divine alignment, alignment with God's plan, God's timing, God's wisdom, God's protection, and God's purpose. When you surrender, you step into a divine partnership where God handles what you cannot, carries what you shouldn't, and accomplishes what you never could. And once you taste the peace that comes from alignment, you will never again mistake surrender for defeat. You will recognize it as the pathway to the life God has been trying to give you all along. Peace comes when you release the battle that isn't yours. But most people spend years fighting wars that God never assigned to them. They fight to be understood by people who have no intention of understanding them. They fight to hold together relationships that God has already released. They fight to fix situations that were never theirs to fix. They fight to control outcomes that were never under their control in the first place. And the more they fight, the more exhausted they become, not because the battle is too big, but because the battle isn't theirs. Peace isn't something you chase. Peace is something you uncover the moment you stop fighting battles you were never meant to fight. So many of us carry stress, anxiety, and pressure simply because we are holding responsibilities God didn't assign to our hands. We feel responsible for everyone's feelings, everyone's choices, everyone's mistakes. We feel pressure to fix things that are breaking, pressure to rescue people who refuse to rescue themselves, pressure to make life unfold according to our script. But peace comes when you realize, this isn't my battle. Peace comes when you can say, I am not God. Peace comes when you understand the difference between what you are called to handle and what God alone can handle. You cannot fight every storm, fix every problem, or force every outcome. And you don't have to. The moment you release the unnecessary battle, peace sweeps in like a flood. Some battles drain your soul because they are not aligned with your assignment. When God calls you to something, He equips you. When God calls you to a battle, He gives you the strength, the clarity, the strategy, the endurance. But when you take on a battle that isn't yours, you will always feel overwhelmed, exhausted, confused, and defeated because you are fighting without divine backing. Think about it. God never intended for you to fight every fire that erupts around you. Some fires are meant to burn things away. Some fires are meant to expose what was unstable. Some fires are meant to purify your path. When you interfere with what God is trying to refine, you get burned. But when you step back and let God move, you discover that His way is better, wiser, safer, and far more peaceful than your own. Peace grows when you learn to differentiate between your role and God's role. Your role is obedience. God's role is outcome. Your role is faithfulness. God's role is fulfillment. Your role is prayer. God's role is power. Your role is surrender. God's role is strategy. You weaken your peace every time you try to trade roles with God. Every time you try to handle what He alone can carry, peace slips through your fingers. But the moment you let God be God, peace returns. Peace isn't found in control, it's found in trust. One of the greatest mistakes people make is thinking that releasing a battle means they don't care. But releasing a battle isn't about apathy, it's about wisdom. It's saying, I care, but I care enough to stop destroying myself over something I cannot change. It's saying, I love, but I love enough to let go of what is hurting me. It's saying, I am willing, but I am also humble enough to admit this is beyond me. Releasing a battle is recognizing that peace matters more than pride, more than control, more than looking strong, more than forcing an outcome. Peace is not passive. Peace is powerful. Peace is a declaration that you trust God more than your own ability to manipulate circumstances. There are battles we fight internally that rob us of peace long before anything external does. The battle of what if, the battle of overthinking, the battle of replaying conversations, the battle of imagining worst case scenarios, the battle of trying to decode someone else's intentions. The battle of assuming responsibility for things far outside our influence. These internal battles create storms inside us even when life is calm outside. But when you release those battles, when you declare, God, I don't know and I don't need to know. I release this thought. I release this fear. I release this assumption. I trust you. Peace begins to settle your mind like a gentle wave. Peace is not the absence of thoughts. It is the discipline of surrendering thoughts to God. Many of us lose peace because we fight to make people see our worth. We battle for validation, for acceptance, for approval, for recognition. But the moment you stop fighting for the wrong audience, peace walks in. Your worth doesn't come from who claps for you. It comes from who created you. Your identity isn't shaped by who agrees with you. It's shaped by who designed you. The battle for human approval is one of the most exhausting battles of all, and it never ends until you release it. When you stop fighting to be appreciated by those who cannot appreciate you, you reclaim your peace. When you stop trying to fit into places God never assigned you, peace fills your soul. When you stop forcing yourself into hearts that don't have the capacity for you, peace becomes your home. There are seasons when God will intentionally block your efforts, not because He wants to frustrate you, but because He wants to free you. God knows when the battle isn't yours. God knows when you're fighting from insecurity, fear, or pressure instead of purpose. God knows when you're trying to rescue people who need to meet Him, not depend on you. God knows when your involvement is delaying their growth. So sometimes He will shut doors, end relationships, shift opportunities, or drain your strength just to make you stop fighting the wrong battle. It is a mercy disguised as a disruption. It is grace disguised as inconvenience. And if you look back at your life, you will see the evidence of God protecting you from battles that would have destroyed your peace. Peace is not built through striving. It is built through trust. It's built through the daily decision to put the battle back in God's hands. When you wake up in the morning and say, Lord, I give this situation to you, you protect your peace. When you refuse to carry the emotional weight of someone else's decisions, you protect your peace. When you stop arguing about things that do not change the outcome, you protect your peace. When you pull back from trying to convince, control, or correct people who are committed to misunderstanding you, you protect your peace. And every time you choose peace over pressure, heaven strengthens you. Letting go is not losing. Letting go is not weakness. Letting go is spiritual maturity. It is the acknowledgement that God's hands are safer than yours. His timing is wiser than yours. His strategy is stronger than yours. Peace comes when you stop wrestling with what God is trying to remove. Peace comes when you stop questioning what God has already answered. Peace comes when you stop reopening doors God has already closed. Peace comes when you say, God, this battle is yours, not mine. I release it. I trust you. I choose peace. And here's the beautiful truth. When you release the battle that isn't yours, God takes it personally. He steps into the situation. He handles what is too heavy for you. He fights what you cannot fight. He defends you, protects you, provides for you, guides you, strengthens you. God has never lost a battle, and He never will. So when you place the battle into His hands, victory isn't just possible, it's guaranteed. Peace is not far away. Peace is not complicated. Peace is one decision away, the decision to stop fighting what God has already claimed as His responsibility. The moment you let go, peace flows in. The moment you release, strength rises. The moment you surrender the wrong battle, you step into the right destiny. Peace has been waiting for you. You just have to stop fighting battles that were never yours to win. When it's all said and done, the truth is simple but life-changing. You were never created to be the manager of the universe. You were never designed to carry every burden, solve every problem, predict every outcome, or control every moving piece of your life. God didn't ask you to be divine. He asked you to trust the one who is. And somewhere between your exhaustion and His invitation, there is a holy surrender that can rewrite your future. You've spent years letting worry beat you, limit you, shrink you, and blind you. But today, right now, God is calling you into a new way of living, a way where peace is not the reward, but the starting point. A way where trust is not your last resort, but your first response. A way where your hands are no longer clenched from fear, but open to receive what God has already prepared. If you want to see God move, you must stop trying to be God in your own life. If you want to experience peace, you must release what your mind keeps replaying. If you want to grow, you must let go. Heaven does not respond to worry. Heaven responds to faith. And faith begins where your control ends. So release it. Release the fear. Release the pressure. Release the questions. Release the timelines. Release the battles that were never assigned to your name. Let it fall off your shoulders like chains breaking in the presence of freedom. Because when you stop worrying about what you cannot control, you make room for the God who controls everything. I don't know what you're facing, but I know this God is not intimidated by your storm. He's not confused by your chaos. He's not overwhelmed by your situation. If you could have fixed it, it would already be fixed. If you could have lifted it, it would already be lifted. If you could have changed it, it would already be changed. Your limitation is not your failure. It's your instruction. It's God showing you that this part is His. So let Him be God. Let Him fight. Let Him carry you. Let Him open doors. Let Him silence storms. Let Him do what only He can do. And as you walk out of this message, walk with your head high, your spirit calm, and your faith rooted. Because you are stepping into a life where worry no longer owns you. You are stepping into a chapter where peace becomes your portion. You are stepping into a place where your trust in God becomes stronger than the pressure around you. You are stepping into the future God wrote for you long before worry ever tried to distract you. So lift your hands. Lift your faith, lift your expectation, and declare this not as a hope, but as a vow. I will stop worrying. I will trust God. I will surrender what I cannot control, and I will walk in the peace that was purchased for me. Because when you trust God with the things you cannot control, you don't just survive, you rise. You don't just endure, you transform. You don't just make it through, you come out with testimony, clarity, power, and peace. May God give you the strength to release, the courage to trust, and the grace to move forward without fear. Your worry ends today. Your peace begins now.